Just like the game itself, this is a culmination of all of our season's work. Jackson State versus South Carolina State, the 2024 Celebration Bowl. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at our key to victory for both South Carolina State and Jackson State, the two biggest storylines going into this game. And I'm going to try to not be too obvious. We'll talk about what is at stake. So we're going to keep that out of the storylines, even though we know that's the biggest deal. And we'll kick it off with the three matchups to watch out for in Jackson State versus South Carolina State. We were supposed to have Aaron Webb with us. We had a couple of something he had to take care of. Let's just keep it there. I'll keep it private. But he had some things that he had to take care of. So now it's me, Dolo. I hope you didn't show up just for him. I guess I'll tell by how many people cut it off at 2 minutes through the show. But anywho, this is what we're doing, the three matchups, and it all kicks off with Irv Mulligan versus Aaron Smith. And I understand that one thing that I've said repeatedly, I was on Urban Sports Scene yesterday. That was a great show. Y'all should look that up. It was absolutely fantastic. I was at the beginning of the show, so you don't have to go search for anything. But after I get off, you stay on and check out what my guys is talking about. But one of the things that I've said about him being Irv Mulligan is that you can't just rely on one guy to stop Mulligan. That's not how it works. Irv Mulligan is such a talented player that you're going to need to bring 2, 3, 4 players to come tackle him. And not because he's going to power through everybody, but because he's elusive, because he is strong. He can make the first person miss, whether that's through power or quickness. You don't want to bank on Aaron Smith making that tackle every single time, because sometimes he's not, sometimes he will. But on the times that he isn't able to make the tackle, if he doesn't and there's nobody else there, Irv Mulligan has the speed to where if it's green pasture, it's touchdown. He has the power to where if you're going against him versus a defensive back, he can run through that guy. He has the shiftiness to where he can outrun or just elude that guy. You don't want to make it one-on-one. But at the end of the day, if there is one person who you're looking at to defeat Irv Mulligan, it's probably Aaron Smith. That defensive line has to take care of that offensive line for Jackson State. They have to allow Aaron Smith to have free reign and be able to move. We had Kobe on the show, and Kobe dropped a couple of really interesting nuggets. One of the nuggets that he dropped was that, hey, Irv Mulligan is the best running back that we faced this year. And they faced Jamari Taylor, right? They faced the Norfolk State guys. So they have played talented running backs, but Irv Mulligan is the best. And I would agree with that. But he also said that Aaron Smith's best ability is sideline to sideline speed. I understand that Mulligan is looked at as more of a thumper, but don't think that just because Smith goes sideline to sideline, he can't get north and south. He does all of that. The point in mentioning the range is that anywhere that Mulligan wants to take it, whether it's a stretch play, whether it's a toss play, whether it's a dive, Smith can be there for that. I'm looking at the defensive line to just not get pushed back, to not allow offensive linemen to get to the second level. And then when we get Jones or Smith and we get Mulligan against those two linebackers, can South Carolina State bring him down and not let him fight for extra yardage? Sometimes winning a battle is making a 2-yard play into a 4-yard play. It's not sexy. It don't look good, but Irv Mulligan does a really good job of turning 2-yard runs into 4-yard runs. And at the end of the day, 2nd and 8 looks a lot different than 2nd and 6. 3rd and 5 looks different than 3rd and 3. That keeps the ability to run on the table on third down. These are little gains that make a huge difference. But Smith, he has over 70 tackles. He's rangy. He gets in the backfield. He does everything, right? So it's going to be a very fun matchup to watch. And he was just invited to the Shrine Bowl. So, he's one of the best players in Black college football, or really just FCS football, period. I don't think there's a need to really define him to just Black college football. Then the next one, you flip it on the other side. The most important matchup is those South Carolina State wide receivers versus Jackson State secondary. And it's a matchup that I don't know how you stop. That's the most difficult thing, because it feels like they get open so easily. It feels like they get open so quickly. You're going to have to hold. You're going to have to hold. And maybe some of this is the Jackson State defensive line getting their hands up. Maybe some of this is just trying to bat down passes at the line of scrimmage. That will help. This is a whole unit job. So it's funny because when you're in this type of game, I'll keep that for the coaches, for the storyline. I'm not gonna go there. When I mentioned defense, just know that this is what I was thinking about mentioning now. But Caden High has 892 yards, 7 touchdowns. Justin Smith-Brown, 725, 4 touchdowns. Ionaj Carter, 592, 6 touchdowns. And they're so talented. They're so talented, and they can take the roof off. So you're going to have to be carpenters. You're going to have to be working up there, making sure that the roof doesn't get taken off the defense, because if it does, that quick strike ability, it's going to put your offense right back on the field. If your offense can't deliver, there's so many aspects of this game. The scariest part is that you've seen explosive offenses, right? And I'm talking about South Carolina State, because both teams can put up points. But when looking at South Carolina State, you've seen explosive offenses before in football. The idea of an offense being explosive the idea of an offense being explosive is not new material. But a lot of times you say, all right, we just want to make them nickel and dime. That's what we want to force this offense to do. So when you have players like Carter, like Smith-Brown, like High, who can take the top off of a defense, let's force them nickel and dime. But they do that well too. That's the thing about South Carolina State and their passing attack. You want to tell them you got to march down the field. They'll do it. If you want to say we're going to crunch down and we're going to leave the top exposed, they'll take that off of you. It's a complete passing attack on every single level with 3 weapons who can hit you on every level. Right? You want to do that, we're going to throw that screen pass to Caden High. We can go ahead and take that 20 yards too. It's going to be difficult. For Jackson State, the entire unit has to be a part of this. The defensive line has to be a part of this. They have to win quickly. The secondary, they have to hold on, or they have to stall them out. This is not easy. You do not see people do this frequently. And Eric Phoenix is going to be back. He has so many wide receivers to go to. And I point to that North Carolina Central game. Against North Carolina Central, South Carolina State was in many must-pass situations, and they felt effortless. First down passes can feel a lot more easy to complete than third down passes, simply because the secondary is approaching you in a different way. Some of those third downs felt like first downs, where it's like, oh, we didn't know you was going to pass. That's the ease of it. That was the ease of it. And that's not a slight to North Carolina Central. That is a bonus. That is a boost. That is a compliment of South Carolina State. Then the last matchup that I'll look at is Ashaad Hall versus Jayden Broughton. This is another guy, or a pair of guys, really, that Kobe brought up. And when you do these highlights on Thursday and Wednesday, and then you come in on Friday and you break down both of the teams, there's going to be some overlap. So really, this is me giving my opinion on some of the things that those guys said. This is the type of game where I've done matchups in the past where we're going to add a little bit of fluff. Let's spice it up. Let's talk about this tight end versus this safety or something like that. We ain't adding no fluff today. We getting straight to it. These are the most important matchups in the most important game. Ashaad Hall and Jayden Broughton are the best pass rushing duo in Black college football. At one point, you could make a strong argument that they were the best pass rushing duo in all of FCS football. I would have to look a little bit closer at the numbers, because there's a wider gap between Broughton and Hall now on a per game basis. But Ashaad Hall is 3rd in sacks per game. Broughton is 19th. There's no other HBCU that has 2 players in the top 10 or top 20. I don't know if there's anybody else in other college football, but As far as HBCUs, it doesn't exist. Um, but yeah, just this idea of Broughton and Hall off the edges in the backbone of the team, as Kobe called them. If you haven't checked that out, go check out Kobe's Wednesday episode. Ken Clark was on Thursday's episode. Y'all go show love to that because it gives an isolated view. 30 minutes of each school. This is 30 minutes of splitting each school, right? But this unit is so stacked. They're so deep. You're looking at the two guys off of the edge who, if you're going to pass the ball, and Jackson State is going to pass the ball. I understand that they want to run first and they'll do that, but they are going to pass the ball. South Carolina State has racked up 4 or more sacks in every game for the last month and a half, 2 months, except for last week against Norfolk State. And they didn't pass the ball but 18 times, you know? Well, you're looking at it, before the final game of the season, South Carolina State was racking up 4 and 6 sacks per game on a regular basis. What will they do in the Celebration Bowl is a huge question. But let's push forward and let's look at the storylines. I think that there is a great amount of star power, and there's also the need to isolate how quickly that these coaches have found success as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the only place that I will go for all of my tickets, and it doesn't really matter what it is that I need. Is it tickets to the circus? That's always my favorite one to bring up because I remember when I seen that was crazy to me. Is it tickets to a football game? Season's almost ending for a lot of teams. Is it the NBA? The season's kicking up for a lot of teams, right? We have Christmas Day coming up soon. Maybe you want to go to a Christmas Day game. You can get all of these tickets on Game Time, and this is the only place that I've seen where prices go down as we get closer to the game or we get closer to the event. And if you're looking at, I'll tell you a story. I had a friend of mine who we were at Raw. We were at WWE Raw or SmackDown. We were at WWE SmackDown. And he was like, dang, I didn't buy no tickets. I told him, go to Game Time. They're up to an hour after the game available. All you have to do is go there. And if you're new, go ahead and download the app, create an account, use the code Locked On College. You get $20 off your first purchase. Get that $20 off your first purchase when you use the code Locked On College. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC. That's one of our sibling shows, right? Meaning they're a conference show on the Locked On Podcast Network. And a friend of mine sent me a clip from that earlier today that was just absolutely hilarious. It was ridiculous. I don't want to say it on here and spoil it, but you should go check it out. And they were talking about the weather. They were talking about the freaking weather and the difference between weather in different areas as they prepare for the Locked On college, or excuse me, Locked On, but for the college football playoffs. Anyway, we're going to keep pushing and we're going to look at the storylines because I do think that there are some huge storylines in this game, and namely the star power. We'll leave the universities aside for a second, but you have the best quarterback in the country. You have the best running back in the country. You have the best wide receiving core in the country. You have the hottest head coaching candidate from this past offseason. You have TC Taylor, who I don't know how to actually relay the star power of Taylor, but to leave him out would feel wrong. And he has a certain something to him that I feel like he deserves to be mentioned along the stars, just like Chennis Berry does. There is a lot of star power in this game. And the reason you know it's a lot of star power, ain't nobody even talking about the trenches. And you have the best pass rushing duo in Black college football, as I mentioned. You have two of the top offensive lines, two of the top defensive lines, right? You have so much in the trenches where this might be the most important battles. But we want to talk about Caden High, Ionaj Carter, Justin Smith-Brown, Irv Mulligan, Travis Terrell, Jacobian Morgan, Zy McDonald, Eric Phoenix. We want to talk about those guys. We want to talk about Robert McDaniel. We want to talk about Azias Guthrie. We want to talk about Diego Addison. We want to talk about Gerard Washington. We want to talk about all of these players. There's so many players on the skill position level, and some of these you may say, oh, not necessarily star power. Okay, take a couple of them out. You still have the best quarterback, best running back, best wide receiver trio. You still have the best head coaches in the game. You still have all of this in the game. In the game. The Celebration Bowl. You still have South Carolina State, Jackson State, the illustrious brands of those universities and the decorated history in the game of football at those universities. This ain't just regular. This ain't regular, right? This is two teams who, yeah, they met a couple of years ago. Who cares? When you think about black college football, these are two of the schools that you think of historically. Historically, South Carolina State, who's putting out on a current basis, who's putting out more and more impactful NFL players than South Carolina State? Nobody. I can tell you, sing some Keith Sweat, because I don't see nobody who's comparing to the. You just look at the last one. I would say the most recent impactful HBCU player would have to be Kobe Durant, right? Like if we're talking on a defensive side of the ball, Brandon Codrington would be in that conversation too. He would be in that conversation too as far as a special teamer because he's a return specialist. But I would say Durant simply being on football. I mean, being on the defense side of the football. That's what I would say. So you have a lot of them, man. You have a lot of them. But then you go to the coaches, and the coaches is really the story here for me. Year 2 for TC Taylor, year 1 for Chennis Berry. And when you think about what they've accomplished so fast, you would feel as if they're decorated because you've known them for a while. I think even when Coach Prime was there, you knew TC Taylor. I feel like that name wasn't hidden. It was definitely somebody I was aware of. But he's had his first 2 seasons as a head coach. And for him, he said, look, man, I'd have been to the Celebration Bowl. I think this is 4th time. I got to win eventually. And it's a funny thing. But yeah, like you keep shooting, you got to win eventually, right? But TC Taylor, for what he's been able to do in year 2, to build up this program that was absolutely depleted. After Deion Sanders left, there was so much rebuilding that had to happen at Jackson State that I don't think you should have been able to come back to this exact spot in 2 years. If we just being honest, when Deion Sanders left, so many other pieces left at critical positions to the point where TC Taylor had to start over completely. He was still bringing in great recruiting classes, which is a testament to not only the university, but his ability as a recruiter as well. But they had to start from scratch. And in doing that, they were able to make it to the Celebration Bowl in year 2. That's not anything to scoff at. And then with Chennis Berry, I'm going to keep it very simple. You are not supposed to make it to the Celebration Bowl in year 1 of coaching. I don't care if he came from Benedict. I don't care if he transitioned from some PWI as a defensive coordinator. I don't care if he was a Hugh Jackson transplant from the NFL. I do not care who or what Chennis Berry's background is or could have been. In year 1, you're not supposed to come in, win the division, make it to the Celebration Bowl, and possibly be the best team in black college football. That is not supposed to happen. It doesn't happen often, and it should be championed. I think we focus a lot on the fact that he did at the D2 ranks, and that's important because he has the chance to extend his HBCU domination. If Chennis Berry is able to come up with this victory, you realize that would mean that he hasn't lost to an HBCU in 3 years? He ain't lose when he was at Benedict. He made it to the playoffs. They didn't have their own Celebration Bowl. He made it to the playoffs and he lost. Then the next year, he did the same thing, went undefeated in conference play again, and then lost in the playoffs. This year, his chance at postseason is in the Celebration Bowl. He didn't lose a MEAC game. He hasn't lost to an HBCU. Well, that's not true. He lost to FAMU. So that is different. That just came to my head. I was trying to think about what out-of-conference games happened. But still, the HBCU domination point would remain strong. It just wasn't absolutely undefeated. But when you look at Chennis Berry, for him to run through the SIAC 2 years in a row, go undefeated, run through the MEAC this year and go undefeated, and then end up being the Celebration Bowl champion to be the HBCU champion, you were the Division II Black College Football champion, the best team. No one was questioning that. 2 years in a row. This year, you come in and you're the best on the FCS level too. We're going to have to give some respect. Because that does not happen. The same way you're not supposed to come in year 1 and win it all, you're not supposed to come in from the D2 ranks and just continue your domination. That's not what's supposed to happen. Somebody's supposed to chin check you. Somebody's supposed to say, hey, welcome to the NFL. That's like a rookie coming in and winning MVP. It ain't supposed to happen. This is special. But let's push forward and look at the keys to victory, because for South Carolina State, also, let me add this. Jay Walker made a comment that I don't know if I necessarily agree with, But he said this is the first time that the two best teams have played, which is undisputedly, I think is how he said it. I felt like we had that in 2022 with you had when you had North Carolina Central and Jackson State. I feel like you had that. But what I will say is that he brings up a great point that this is the game that we've all been waiting for. We have been waiting for South Carolina State versus Jackson State. I don't know when that became the game that we all wanted, but I do believe that as an objective fan, we wanted to see South Carolina State versus JSU because we felt like those were the best two teams and we got what we wanted. I don't know if we wanted that any other year. That may be his point. I don't know if we were like sitting around, I got to have North Carolina Central versus Jackson State. I personally feel like we should have been. I personally feel that way. But I don't know if that was a fan base wide thing. This undoubtedly was. It was Jackson State, South Carolina State. We've been asking for this for at least a month, and it's here. The Celebration Bowl. I can't wait to watch. I can't. There's no team that can say, but nah, y'all didn't make the playoffs. There's no team. Maybe Tennessee State, but y'all wouldn't even be eligible for this game. So we'll keep you in a different conversation. Let's push forward now and look at the keys to victory. For South Carolina State, it's super simple to say, stop Irv Mulligan. But I think we all know how difficult it is to actually get done. And we'll look at that as we continue and wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. I don't care what your favorite sport is, it is on FanDuel. They have a UFC event this week. They have one every week, but they have one on there. You can put some money down on FanDuel. You can go to the NFL. You can go to the NBA, right? The Saints and Commanders are playing this weekend. I don't know how pretty that's going to be, but you can put some money on it. Maybe you put some money down on Washington. You can put some money on the NBA. You can put some money on tennis, everything, guys, whether it's individual players, whether it's teams, everything in between. And if you're new to FanDuel, you put down a $5 bet and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. Just go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to make every moment more. And remember, if you're new to FanDuel, you put down a $5 bet, it must win, and you will get $150 back in bonus bets. So go to FanDuel, take advantage of all of the sport opportunities that they have, and make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. I got on the jumpsuit, the track suit, so that y'all know I'm hopping off the bus with it. It's go time. It's game time. It's the Celebration Bowl, the Super Bowl of HBCUs, the number 1 and number 2 teams that we're looking at all season long to make it to this game. Jackson State, South Carolina State. The moment is here. And I'm looking at South Carolina State's key to victory as stopping the best player on the other side. I know. Sounds simple. I'm not going to do that with Jackson State. But here it sounds simple, but I think it has so many layers that getting complicated would be overcomplicating the situation. Sometimes we try to avoid oversimplifying and we make it too complicated. I'm not doing that today. Jackson State's engine is Irv Mulligan. Jackson State's engine is Irv Mulligan. The last time I checked, you can't drive without your engine. I think that the Tigers have a solid passing attack. I like Fortillion. I like Spencer. I like Morgan, right? And all intents and purposes, we think that Morgan is going to be the starter. But at the same time, the engine that makes this thing go, is Irv Mulligan and his ability to run the football over everything else, because that's what they want to do. They run the ball more than they pass the ball. So if you stop Irv Mulligan, now you're putting them in must-pass situations, which is not where they want to be. If you stop Irv Mulligan, all of a sudden you get some 3rd and 7s. If you stop Irv Mulligan, you take out their greatest source of offense. Just saying. It sounds simple, but it's so many layers. And to me, part of it might not even be your defense. Part of it might be your offense. Number 1, if you hold the ball longer, Jackson State has less time to hold the ball. But secondly, if you're able to get a big lead, that can take the run game out of it. And I'll use this example. So we every week at Saints Wire, we break down and predict what will happen in the game, right? And we talk about the score and we write it up or whatever. I personally said that I think the Saints lose, shocker. But I think a big part of that is you could lose or start, you could get down big, and now you can't run the football. Take Alvin Kamara out the game by score, not by stopping him, but by score. I think that could happen with Irv Mulligan. You take him out by score where now you have to throw the ball more. That leans right into what you want. And to me, I think that South Carolina State's defense is meant and kind of designed to play with that lead. They can stop the run, but you look at a guy like Jared Washington. Washington has 2 pick sixes this year. They done robbed the quarterback the last 3 weeks. Let's take Norfolk State out because Norfolk State barely passed the ball. But before that, they were out here stealing from Norfolk State or from against Morgan State, against Howard, right? So I think that that's the key to victory at the end of the day. But I kind of leaned myself into what Jackson State's key to victory is, and that is winning the turnover battle. They have to win the turnover battle. The one thing that did them in this year was turning over the football. They have 5 turnovers against Grambling. Against FAMU, they have 4. That game shouldn't have been that close. It shouldn't have been. They're better than FAMU. Clearly to me, they're better than FAMU. And I don't think that you can afford the luxury of I'm gonna give up the ball 4 times and my defense is gonna stall them out. We talk about defense. And I thought this was the perfect time to bring it up. Defense means when one side is slacking, we pick it up. There has to be an alternate meaning to defense this week. Defense means we need to all be on our you know what. That's what it means. Because the idea that I can turn the ball over 4 times or turn over the ball 5 times and my defense is going to hold up the side, I don't think so. If you turn over that ball 3-4 times, I do not believe that your defense is going to stop South Carolina State and allow you to win the game. I don't. That's something that you just can't do if you're JSU, especially knowing that what I just mentioned about Washington is that when he gets his hand on the ball, he takes it for 6. Washington has 2 pick sixes this year, and he has 2 interceptions on the year. So every time he touches it, you know what happens. So this is going to be a fascinating game in general. It's going to be a fascinating game in general, but if you're Jackson State, you can't turn the ball over because you're not going against a pedestrian offense. You're going against an offense that is going to take advantage and abuse the fact that you turn over the ball. If you're South Carolina State, you want to stop Irv Mulligan because it forces the ball into Jacobian Morgan's hand. And though he is a quality QB, he's not the person you want to go win the Celebration Bowl. You want Irv Mulligan to do that. If Irv Mulligan is obviously, if he's the MVP, that means Jackson State won. But if he has a big game, Jackson State has a significant larger chance of winning the Celebration Bowl. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. We'll be back on Monday to break down this game. I don't think we'll be talking about anything else. It'll be all Celebration Bowl, first segment, second segment, third segment. Then we'll come back the next day and we'll get into some Celebration Bowl again. So this is the biggest game of the year, guys. Be on the lookout for it. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we're here to the family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.